shaking. Okie dokie. Here we go. Scroll to the top of my notes. Yeah. Okay, there we go. Hello and welcome to this very special Wednesday edition of the PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast, the show that is for the fans, by the fans. I am your phenomenal host, Mr. Podcasting, Chris Belcher. You can follow me at Chris Belcher24 on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The show is at PBW Podcast. Make sure you give us a follow. Make sure you give us a like. Shoot us some comments. We love interaction on social media. That is the best way and easiest way to get in touch with us. That is also the best and easiest way to tell us what you want to hear on the show. We want to talk about what you want to hear about. So make sure you interact with us. Let us know how we're doing, or, I mean, good or bad, doesn't matter. This is our show and we're going to do what we want, but we do want to hear your feedback. So make sure you give that to us. Make sure you subscribe to the bodyslam.net YouTube channel. That is where you can find the video version of our podcast each and every Monday and Wednesday, as well as all of our archives. So make sure you subscribe to that channel. Make sure you're checking us out on Sports Wire Radio every Monday and Wednesday. And if you just want your podcast in its traditional audio format, you can subscribe wherever you find your podcast. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, all those places. We are available right there. Once again, my name is Chris Belcher. Thank you so much for joining me for this very special 2021 year in review. We're going to talk all things in the wrestling world in 2021, well, as much as we can fit in about 45 minutes to an hour. But I could not do that alone because there are a lot of things that I'm not going to remember. So joining me is the Young Buck. Ladies and gentlemen, with me as always, my co-host, Mr. Andy York. Andy, it's been a loaded wrestling 2021, man.
It has been. We were kind of talking about it before. I'm sure during this conversation, we're going to bring stuff up and we're going to be like, oh, yeah, that did happen this year. Because there's been a lot of great stuff that's happened this year and a lot of stuff that, makes us still scratch our head and still makes me mad every time I think about it. So there's a lot of things that we're going to cover in this massive episode.
I mean, we've got a long way to go, a long range of stuff to cover, really. And man, the beginning of 2021, we still had the Thunderdome, and we still had small crowds in AEW, and now we're back to full capacity and touring. So we've come a long way in 2021. Man, it's almost like, in preparing for this episode, it was really difficult for me to remember like specific things when we didn't have a crowd. You know what I mean? And at least that far back, because we're so, again, as wrestling fans, we were so conditioned to having it, didn't know what it was like to not have it. And then we didn't have it for so long. Now it's back and we're like, we forget what it was like, you know?
Yeah. And it's like the Thunderdome and Daly's Place seems like years ago at this point. It really does. So the fact that we had that this year was kind of shocking and surprising. The only thing like I remember vividly was like WrestleMania for WWE, WrestleMania on. Like that's what I remember the most, is that I don't really remember a whole lot about the Thunderdome era because that necessarily was what I consider some of WWE's dark times, because they didn't have a crowd and they were definitely holding a lot of things back booking wise until they got the crowd, which makes sense. But I think that time period was very difficult to watch at times because there was no crowd reaction, and I think that was played a massive part into it. And even AEW with Daly's Place, you had a crowd reaction, but it was nothing like what we're getting now. So seeing the stark differences between now and at the beginning of the year is absolutely crazy.
Yep. Oh, no doubt. Absolutely. So like you've got there were good things that happened in the Thunderdome, obviously, and we're going to talk about some of those things. The Thunderdome was incredibly inventive. I remember when we first got it at SummerSlam 2020, and it was just like, oh my gosh, okay, this feels right now. This feels much better than what we previously had. And of course, like you said, Daly's Place, they were able to integrate more people there because they were outdoors and different things like that. WWE was a little bit more cautious, but at the same time, it all worked out for all of them because, like you said, it seemed like really that both companies really held back their booking until we got live crowds, which makes sense. You obviously you save stuff for the crowds, but we can agree, man, that the first part of 2021 was hard to get through at times, but there were still some good things that came out of it.
Yeah, for every for every zombie match, because I think that happened this year.
Yes, it did.
For every zombie match that happened in the Thunderdome, you had a Drew versus Sheamus that tore the house down with nobody in it. So like
Right.
you have your good moments and your bad moments. And I will say, like, the Thunderdome helped in a lot of ways, especially with somebody like the Fiend, because you were able to do a lot more
Yep.
stuff with no crowd there than if there was a crowd. And I think that definitely played a part into it. So it's going to be a lot of fun to go back and talk about all of this stuff and look at some of the people that we started the year with in WWE and now look at the roster we have now and
Yep.
everything else. Is going to be crazy. And the same thing with AEW, from having their homegrown talent to now having a more flushed out roster in a lot of ways. So it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about both of those.
Well, let's just get into it, man. Let's talk about the rosters right now. You mentioned all the people that WWE released, all the people that AEW signed. We haven't really had vice versa yet, but we're probably getting there within the next year or so. But let's talk about WWE first. I mean, a plethora of superstars that have been released. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to get to all of them, but I'm going to try to name the majority. And we got Bray Wyatt, Braun Strowman, Andrade, Jeff Hardy, Aleister Black, Ruby Riott, the Iconics, Karrion Kross, Keith Lee, Buddy Murphy, Chelsea Green, Scarlett. I mean, are there any that I missed that you can think of off the top of your head at least?
I mean, like, Oney Lorcan was released.
Oney Lorcan.
To me, he was a big guy in NXT, but I think NXT was definitely his
right
ceiling in a lot of ways.
Oney Lorcan. Tucker
Tucker,
from Heavy Machinery.
Yeah, he was released.
Man, but just in those names, I think I know what your answer to this question is going to be, but I'm going to ask it anyway because our friends over at bodyslam.net, they tweeted this out. So obviously, because they're our partners, I want to bring that up on our show. Of all of the releases that WWE had in 2021, which one shocks you the most?
There were two. There were two that really shocked me. The first one obviously is Bray Wyatt, because that one, to me, unless it was both of them coming to that agreement, but of all reports, it doesn't sound like it was. It sounds like it was just another quote unquote budget cut reason. That one shocked me because he had been, like, I think the Thunderdome era and the pandemic era for the Fiend was the best time for the Fiend.
Sure.
And he was the forefront. He was Universal Champion twice. While he lost to Goldberg, he had a match with Goldberg. He had a match with Cena at WrestleMania and beat Cena in one of the most creative things I've ever seen in pro wrestling.
Right.
And so the fact that they released him, that really shocked me. And then the other one was Keith Lee. I still don't understand how you don't use a talent like Keith Lee and make him the biggest star in the company just by letting him be him. Because he organically got over in NXT. Because he had a slow build up into NXT, but that final form that we got, winning both titles at Great American Bash, and then going. I mean, I was in the building at Survivor Series in 2019 when he had that face off with Roman Reigns in the middle of the ring, and the crowd was just electric for it.
Sure.
They were ready for it. And then the Royal Rumble in 2020 with him and Brock Lesnar selling, and like Keith Lee felt like a massive deal then.
Yep.
And then for him to come to the main roster, and I understand he had some health issues that WWE couldn't get around for a majority of the year, and I fully understand that, and I don't hold that against them. But he still was a talent that should not have been released, and I think those two guys are going to be the two that they regret the most releasing.
Okay, let's take a break for just a second. The car place just called me. I had to drop my car off to get looked at this morning. Let me call them right back. Hang on.
You're good.
Hey, Bill, this is Chris Belcher. I just received a call from you guys. All right, go. Okay, good. I'll work out getting there in the next little bit. I'll let you guys know. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. Bye-bye. Should have just left me a message to tell me my car's ready. That's all you needed was to tell me, hey, your car's ready.
Okay.
Come on. All right. I'll kick it back in here in just a second.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Yeah, man, I totally agree. Keith Lee was a huge release. It just seemed like he had all kinds of momentum, like you just talked about. Obviously, Bray Wyatt has been a mainstay in WWE for a long time, a fan favorite for, man, he made such a big impact when he first came in, and he was still a fan favorite no matter what they were really doing with him. Braun Strowman is a name that really jumps out to me that, that's a Vince McMahon kind of guy. If we, if we believe what we hear about the guys that Vince likes and that kind of thing. Honestly, though, I think if I'm going to pick out a name, if I'm going to pick out, most of these guys don't really surprise me, but in looking at this list as a whole and thinking about what could have been or what, they could have done with all of these people, man, I'm going to go with Aleister Black. Because that one is he just seemed like something different that WWE just did not have.
Yep.
And Vince is all the time looking for different characters and characters that resonate and all of that. But I think it was an unfortunate Vince didn't get the character or somebody didn't get it because Andrade, or not Andrade, I'm looking at the list here. Aleister Black has gone on record and said he had a great relationship with Vince. Vince had a great vision for the character and that kind of thing. So I don't think it's so that Vince didn't get it. It just, I don't know what it was. So I think they dropped the ball big on that one. And Karrion Kross too. Looking at Karrion Kross and the way that he was able to dominate in NXT, I think that one was big, but I mean, I guess that all goes into the direction of where NXT is headed, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, Karrion Kross though is one of those of if it's not broke, don't try to fix it. So like trying to fix his ring, like he had one of the best like entrances in WWE, and having him and Scarlett together was just money. And I don't understand them. And another one that we didn't even talk about, like Hit Row didn't even do anything on the main roster.
Hit Row, man, oh my gosh,
Hit Row is the one that kind of shocked me the most out of all. Well, I don't want to say shocked me the most, but it was the one that was like you didn't even give them a chance.
That was that one was a head scratcher for sure.
Because Keith Lee was on the main roster for about a little over a year.
Yeah.
Braun Strowman and Bray Wyatt, they were like mainstay names. Aleister Black had some really great matches with Buddy Murphy. I mean, if Paul Heyman was still creative, Buddy Murphy and Aleister Black would still be there and be in the main event of everything, which is fine. Right. But Hit Row, B-Fab, she was the first one, and that one's the one that shocked me the most because I thought she was the one that, while she was still green, she still like had that look. She had that look. She was the mouthpiece, and she wasn't that bad in the ring. I mean, she was new, but she would very quickly pick things up. But Hit Row was the one that really shocked me as well.
Yeah, I don't know what happened with that. But if we look at it on the flip side, you look at all these people that went over to AEW in 2021. We didn't even talk the contracts that ran out of Adam Cole and Bryan Danielson. Bobby Fish got released. Then obviously you get Aleister Black turning into Malachi Black. He's over there. Miro, which was Rusev in WWE. Paul White, The Big Show, Mark Henry, Christian Cage, Ethan Page, Ruby Soho, Jay Lethal from Ring of Honor. I mean, obviously I'm going to leave somebody out. Andrade, there you go. I'm going to leave somebody out that debuted in AEW in 2021. But which of these guys, I'm not going to let you pick Adam Cole or Bryan Danielson because those are slam dunks. Like you can't pick those.
Right.
But all of those guys that AEW signed in 2021, which one do you think is, obviously we're looking at a crystal ball here. We don't know for sure, but which one is going to benefit AEW the most?
It's hard to pick just one. Like it really is because
it is.
Like right off the top of my head, there are three that really stick out. And like Andrade and Malachi Black are the two that stick out the most because while they haven't been booked perfectly, they've still been heavily involved in every single episode of Dynamite. and they've been heavily involved in AEW. And so that was, those are two guys, and then Ruby Soho. I think Ruby Soho is going to be AEW Women's Champion within the next year and a half, and I think she is going to prove that everything that happened with her in WWE was not on her end, because she has the different look. She's great on the mic. She's great in the ring. She's got the great personality, and so I think Ruby Soho is going to be the women's standout for sure in AEW, or benefit the most from being in AEW. And then, like I said, Malachi Black and Andrade, I think, are the two that's going to benefit really well as of now, depending on who else might show up in AEW in 2022.
That's very, very true. I'm going to go with Jay Lethal, because I think Jay Lethal coming over from Ring of Honor and all the experience that he has and the popularity that he has garnered over the years, it's almost like I almost compare it to AJ Styles finally coming to WWE.
Yeah.
Like Jay Lethal is finally getting his shot at the big time. And TNA was big time there for a couple of years, and he was right in the thick of things. I mean, if wrestling fan or not, you've seen the meme of Jay Lethal and Ric Flair going back and forth in TNA.
When you get to cut a promo with Ric Flair like that, you're pretty well solidified.
That's it. You're exactly right. But just, that's his moment in the spotlight.
Yeah.
So now that he's in AEW, I think they have a real chance to, I don't want to say make him AEW World Champion, but they have the chance to do something special with that kid.
I think he is. I think he's destined to be World Champion, and I'm what I'm really excited for is at some point Adam Cole has to be AEW champion, and I'm so excited because I think they might revisit that Ring of Honor feud between him and Jay Lethal. That was one of the most amazing and the standout feud of Ring of Honor for that year,
right?
And so I think that would be really cool to see that kind of be revisited.
Not to go too far down a rabbit hole here as far as AEW goes, but we've seen that they do not toss their championships around like props. No. They don't. They have meaningful runs. So in saying that, yes, I think Jay Lethal could be champion. Obviously, Adam Cole's going to be champion one day. I'm not saying AEW has like a timetable of when they need to fit all this in, but if they're doing 7-8 month reigns with everybody, reigns are going to be limited. So, reigns, the length of reigns versus the length of contracts and stuff like that, AEW is doing it right as far as not everybody's going to get to be champion. You look up and down the WWE roster, and most everybody, with the exception of a handful, has been world champion. So AEW, you're not going to get that luxury. So guys that we think should be champion aren't going to get there, I don't think. I'm not saying Jay Lethal's in that category. I just think it's possible,
Yeah, and I think that's why the TNT Championship is so perfect, because the TNT Championship feels very prestigious. Like even right now, it feels very prestigious. It's not like, and I'm not trying to dog on WWE, but their US Championship and their IC Championships don't feel as prestigious as they once did.
Sure.
I think the US Championship is feeling more like it now with Damian Priest. Shinsuke Nakamura, not really, because he's only defended it once. So I think that.
And if you noticed back on SmackDown this past Friday, apparently he's hurt. He came out with a cast, and it looks like a broken thumb or some sort of something. I don't know if that plays into it totally, but that has something to do with the current state of it.
Yeah, but I think that's the whole thing of like the TNT Championship. To me, Sammy Guevara may never be AEW champion. He should be at some point, in my personal opinion. But I think having this run with the TNT Championship, one, I think it shows them what he can do with the championship. But then two, like it gives him that championship status, and it gives him that run that we kind of want him to get. So that's kind of what I really enjoy about that whole dynamic of AEW this year.
So in putting releases and signings and all that kind of stuff aside, if you're just focusing on AEW for a minute, not worrying about debuts, because obviously the debut of Bryan Danielson and Adam Cole is like the moment of the year in AEW. I don't know. Good moment, maybe.
It's top two. It's definitely one or two.
Yeah. Okay. So all of that aside, when you're looking at 2021 AEW as a whole,
Yeah.
what sticks out to you?
Oh, no debuts. That's hard. I
Right.
think
No
I
debuts.
think
That's hard.
I think the thing that sticks out to me the most is how meaningful everything was in AEW.
Sure.
Like there was nothing that was necessarily filler. Even like when they went to Cincinnati and you had MJF versus Brian versus uh
Whoever it was, and then he cut the promo on Brian Pillman.
yeah, yeah, and then Brian Pillman Jr. came
Yep.
out
Yep.
and they had that whole exchange and everything else. And then that led
Right.
to like a mini feud between the two of them. That was
Yep.
really good. So like everything that AEW has done this year has felt very meaningful. And even like on Rampage isn't like the most amazing thing all the time, but there are like storyline stuff that continues on Rampage that makes everything kind of meaningful as well. So just the fact that they really have, I feel like this year paid attention to the details of building up these storylines and these feuds, then it made them feel extra special. So that when you get to the 4 pay-per-views 4 times a year, they feel really special. And these matches feel like, other than like Paul White and QT Marshall, they feel like they should
Right.
be on the card, and they feel like they're not like just out of place.
So I'm going to say something very, very similar, but I think that yes, AEW made everything meaningful, and I think that's because we're in such still in the infancy of the company
Yep.
that everything needs to be meaningful.
Yep.
Um, but I'm going to say kudos to AEW for taking the chances that they have taken.
Yeah.
The exploding barbed wire death match didn't turn out the way they wanted it to. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Blood and guts. Some could argue that wasn't as good as what maybe they envisioned. You
Right.
still had another Stadium Stampede match, just a lot of lights out matches.
Yep.
We saw the most brutal women's match that anybody has ever seen
Yep.
on live television. We saw Nick Gage against Chris Jericho.
We saw light tubes. We saw a flaming table. Like we've seen it
all of this stuff. Kudos to AEW for taking
Yep.
chances. I mean, some of them worked out, some of them may not have, some of them you could say was not necessary. You know, we all have our opinions,
right?
But you can't discount AEW for taking chances and really staking their claim in 2021 because they were just getting rolling when this pandemic hit.
Yeah.
So, like you said, it was really hard to watch wrestling with no crowds throughout the majority of 2020. So AEW has to come back out and say, okay, we're here.
Yeah.
We are here to stay, and this is why.
And it also helps them gain like mainstream media at the same time. Like it helps them make, like you said, make a name for themselves. Because I think the flaming table spot like got picked up by ESPN. Like, obviously the one of the biggest debuts that happened on Rampage this year was picked up by every single news outlet in America because of how big that was. So they're definitely making their impact on the mainstream media. Obviously, they're not going to be right now at the level of WWE because how could you when the biggest movie star in the world came from your company? But they're taking the steps to like they're no longer just like, oh, I've never heard of AEW. Like my mom and dad that don't watch wrestling, I talked about it the other day, and they're like, oh yeah, I saw a commercial for that, and like I saw that on the news or whatever, and it would look pretty cool. And I was like, okay, like they're making the right steps, to being that right level competition with WWE, not necessarily in ratings, but like in the media and mainstream stuff, they're right up there with them. They're making the steps to get right up there with them.
Yep. Absolutely. So in turn with WWE, what sort of stuck out to you for WWE in 2021? If you had to put your finger on one or two things.
I think theirs is a tale of two halves. I really do. I think the first half is, if I could sum it up, the first half was they did the best they could with what they were given. In the ThunderDome era, everything, and kind of the same thing with them. They took some chances in the ThunderDome era. Not all of them worked.
Clearly.
The zombie thing was something else that was kind of whatever. Not everything with Alexa Bliss worked all the time. But then you had cool moments with like Ricochet hitting the crossbody, top rope crossbody on John Morrison over the barricade through the crowd, like where the crowd would be.
Right.
Like that was really cool. And like the matches between Drew and Sheamus that were hard hitting, that was really cool. So like they took a lot of chances in the first half, and then the second half, I think the second half they got complacent in a lot of ways, because they didn't really, because they said they had all these massive things kind of planned for when crowds got back and everything else, and some things did happen, but a lot of it kind of felt a little underwhelming at times. And so I think they were kind of complacent through the second half. Not saying that there weren't some amazing things that happened in WWE in the second half of the year, but it was just definitely like it wasn't what I don't think they lived up to what they were building up to, if that makes sense.
Well, I'm going to piggyback on what you just said, because what sticks out to me is WWE stayed true to themselves. They did what WWE is going to do. They didn't really let anybody influence them. I mean, one could argue that when CM Punk debuted on Rampage, they picked up the phone and called Brock Lesnar and Becky Lynch.
Yeah.
I mean, some people believe that it literally happened within those 24 hours. I'm not of that camp. I don't believe that it happened, but I don't think it was a reaction to CM Punk. Now, the CM Punk stuff was coming through the weeds for a couple of weeks, and maybe something like that was like, well, we might need to counter that, but I don't think it was a 24-hour reaction. That's another debate for another time. But I just think WWE stayed true to what they were doing. I think we talked about taking chances with AEW earlier. I think WWE finally saw the chance they could take to turn their big star heel. Because I think if this Thunderdome era would have happened when John Cena was at his height, I think you could have tried to turn him heel because you don't get any backlash from it. So I think WWE took chances in their own way, i.e. the lumberjack match, i.e. the eye for an eye match. I know that wasn't in the Thunderdome or in 2020, but I
forgot about that.
Right? I know. It was in 2019, so technically we're not talking about it. Or
no,
it was
2020.
2020, not 2021. Sorry. Regardless, they took their own chances, but they stayed true to WWE. Good, bad, Vince Russo, or indifferent, that's what you see is what you get. And if you don't like it, then they're still going to be what they are. They're still making money hand over fist, and that's just what they are. And they're not going to change for anybody.
No, they're not. I think the only area where that wasn't true, obviously, this year was NXT. Like they made the change to NXT, and I think part of that was because of how NXT did not compare or compete very well with AEW throughout the first part of the year. And I think that did play a massive part into the change. I mean, if you heard any of the interviews with Adam Cole, they're like, we watched what they were doing every week. And they, we kind of we were influenced in trying to counter things that they were doing and things like that. So I think that definitely did play a part into it. But on the main roster side of everything, I completely agree. They were what they always are, what they're always going to be, and I don't think they're ever going to change.
Let's talk about NXT for just a minute. You went down that rabbit hole. Let's keep that theme going. We saw the death of the Black and Gold brand officially in September. We saw the launch of NXT 2.0. We crowned a new NXT champion the first night of 2.0, and it just so happened to be a mainstay of NXT, which I was very happy about. They didn't switch the title to somebody we've never heard of the first night.
Von Wagner.
Yeah, it wasn't at least Von Wagner or Braun Breaker or whoever. It was at least Tommaso Ciampa. He is still champion to this day. But the Black and Gold as we know it was gone. It's done. And we saw that in the men's War Games match. It was literally the end of the era. I mean, you mentioned that Adam Cole was watching it and they were kind of making their chess moves or whatever. And I think that goes directly against what I was just saying about WWE staying true to themselves. NXT was easily the most popular part of WWE's product, or at least the hottest part as far as the wrestling is concerned. My opinion, that's a bad move on WWE's part to really try to be influenced. So that's the first time we've really seen them be influenced by the ratings or by another company in a long time. Obviously, they haven't had competition, but you get what I mean. Like they're being reactionary instead of just staying true to themselves. And I hate that NXT was what, ultimately was changed as a result of that, because that was some of the best stuff that we got.
That was the best up until probably AEW like 2020 and 2021. maybe 2019 as well. But like that was NXT was the best, the most consistent pro wrestling company in the world at that point. Like
Hands down.
for their long, lengthy run from leaving the game show era into like an actual developmental program, they were the best wrestling company in the world, and I don't think it was even close. And I hate the fact that they have changed all of this. I sort of understand where they're coming from in a way, but I think you could have kept the black and gold brand like it is and bring some of these guys through. And I think you really could have done that and made it work really well. Because we've heard the reports that they're looking for guys like Von Wagner and like Braun Breaker and like the Brock Lesnar lookalike dude that shaved his head bald now. I forget his name.
Ridge Holland.
Yeah, no.
Oh,
he's
no.
He's with
No.
Gacy.
Yeah,
Is that his name now?
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Parker Bordeaux is his actual name, but they changed his in ring
Yeah,
name to
I don't
something.
remember what they changed it to.
They're looking for guys like that. And they had, I mean, NXT had guys like that. I mean, you look at Bronson Reed. Bronson Reed was released after being NXT North American champion, and he fits that mold very well. And so there was just a lot of inconsistency and a lot of head scratching moments from NXT 2.0. But you also got to remember, like, the NXT before that, like even in 2021, had some of the best matches of the year. In Walter versus Dragunov, that match was amazing. I mean, you had some other matches in there as well. So
Walter versus Ciampa from WrestleMania weekend.
Yeah, like there was just a lot of things that took place in the black and gold brand that we're not going to get anymore. And I think it's going to hurt everybody in the long run because, you could watch a takeover. NXT takeovers used to be the best pay-per-views of the year. And now they're iffy at best at times. And I think that's a testament to the new NXT. And I think that's going to be painful and dreadful in the long run. And I just feel bad for Triple H. I really do. He put his heart and soul in NXT, and it's kind of just been taken away and ripped away from him.
Yep, absolutely. We've talked about some of the failures of WWE throughout the ThunderDome era. You mentioned some of the stuff with Bray didn't work. Some of the stuff with Alexa didn't work. And then the zombie whatever we got, that didn't work. NXT 2.0, now that we moved into crowds, jury's still out on that. Just some things that WWE did that was not great. Another thing we did not mention was, I know you're not a fan of, is the ending of Extreme Rules with Finn Balor and Roman Reigns and the top rope breaking and all that kind of stuff. So we see obviously the failures that WWE has had in 2021, but what about AEW? I mean, we mentioned the exploding barbed wire death match.
Yeah.
The end might not have gone as planned. What else from AEW stuck out maybe as a miss in 2021?
We kind of talked about Blood and Guts. I think that was this year too.
That was,
Blood and Guts of the match was really good. The ending was very flat. Because of what you could see. And so that was definitely played a big part into that. I think it's weird because it might be one of the best feuds of the year, but it went on for way too long with MJF and Chris Jericho.
Sure.
I think that one was kind of drug out for too long. Same thing with Malachi Black and Cody. I think that one was taken way too long. I'm trying to think what else kind of happened. There were a couple of moments where things didn't really land for me. Although, well, I mean, a lot of people didn't like the 60-minute draw with Kenny and Bryan Danielson, as well as the 60-minute draw with Hangman Page and Bryan Danielson, which I think those are two of the best matches of the year. And I absolutely love those two matches, but there were a lot of people that hated like the finish of those matches, that played a part into it. So I think a lot of theirs wasn't necessarily storyline things. I think it was maybe they were trying to drag things out for too long. Kind of like Hangman Page, like his rise to the title may have took a little while longer. Obviously, some of that was because he was having a kid and wanted to take some time off to make sure everything was safe and fine and everything else. But I think a lot of it was they may have taken too long to get to where they were going at times.
Right. I totally agree with that. And you know me, how I am impatient about storylines and stuff like that. And yes, I am in the camp of I hated the finish between Hangman Adam Page and Bryan Danielson. Hated it. Absolutely despised it. I was fine. I got over the Bryan Danielson, Kenny Omega. I got over that one. Okay, cool, fine, whatever. But now this one, come on, like come up with something else, please. It's not going. It's clearly you have seen that it's not going to hurt Bryan Danielson. If Hangman Page were to win that match, it's not going to hurt him. Just beat him and move on. It's fine. But yeah. So AEW has some things that they were not, remembered fondly for. I remember, we talked exclusively on this, or extensively on this podcast rather, about the exploding barbed wire death match and how the match was good, but the finish, that's what they remember.
And they could have saved the finish. Like if Eddie Kingston didn't sell it like he sold it, and they both got up and like, really, that's it. I think that would have been fine. Like I think that would have been underwhelming, but it would have been fine.
See,
the fact that Eddie Kingston acted like he died in the middle of the ring to sparklers in the corner is what killed it. Is what, and the commentators too. They were like, "Oh my gosh, he's dead." No, he's not. Like you could touch it and be fine. So like it was not that big of a deal.
I think one of the biggest blunders of AEW in 2021 is when Jim Ross said WWE Dynamite at the end of it's this anniversary Dynamite. It's the last Dynamite before we go back on tour. It's fan appreciation night. They're showing this humongous montage of the best moments in Daly's Place. And Jim Ross says, "We love you so much. Thank you for watching WWE Dynamite." I'm like, oh my gosh.
I think that's another big blunder of the year is AEW commentary. I think that's one. That might be the biggest one is the commentary. Not excluding Excalibur for me. I like Excalibur, and I think Excalibur does a great job at what he's supposed to be doing. And Shivani is hit and miss for me. Sometimes I like Shivani on the call, and other times I'm like, okay, I need you to shut up for a while. Like I understand you hate MJF so much, but please just call the match.
Yeah, the hatred of MJF is starting to get a little out there.
Sometimes it's funny. Like sometimes he'll drop a one-liner that I'm like, okay, that was a nice one-liner. That was fine. And Jim Ross, like he's a legend. He is one of the greatest of all time. Honestly, I would probably say he's the greatest of all time, but I think this AEW run is hurting that legacy a lot.
Yes, it is.
And so I think,
it's like the Undertaker doesn't know when to quit.
Yep, and Goldberg. And I think I think that's coming to a head in 2022. I think it has to. And thoughts and prayers to him right now as he's going through recovery and treatment and everything else. But I think 2022, keep him on. Let him be a producer. Let him be the guy that's in the ear. He's definitely got it.
He's definitely stuff.
He's great at that. Those are the best things he does. But let somebody like a Tom Phillips come in and be the main commentating guy, or just find a homegrown guy and send them out there and train them up to do it right.
But please don't make it Ricky Starks because he's terrible.
Or Tony Khan.
Or Tony. Oh, Lord.
That would be so bad.
That would be so awful.
You thought Vince was bad in the early days. Good Lord.
Oh, Tony Khan would be brutal. All right. If you are just now stumbling upon our show, welcome to the PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast. As we look back at 2021, a year in review, what a fantastic year it was in the world of wrestling. I am your phenomenal host, Mr. Podcasting, Chris Belcher. You can follow me at Chris Belcher24 on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. With me is Mr. Andy York, the Indie Darling. You can follow him at Andy_PBWP as well on social media. Make sure you tune in every Monday and Wednesday, and happy holidays to all of you, wherever you might be celebrating your Christmas season. Happy holidays. Make sure you stay safe, and we hope that we can keep you entertained as this is Christmas week. Earlier this week, you heard our fantastic episode with Mr. Trent Osborne as we talked all about the PWI 500, debated a little bit between number 1 and number 2 there. We won't get into that. I don't want to get upset. But next week, as we mentioned before, we will officially be releasing the Wrath of Me on Starrcade 97. So
I'm excited.
Fasten your seatbelts, folks. It's gonna be fun.
That's being released on my birthday, so I am that's like the best birthday present you could have given me was this episode. So I'm very grateful for that.
happy birthday to you. So,
and to you on Christmas on
that's right.
Christmas Day.
That's true. That is very true. But just to preface this, and I'll mention this again at the end of the episode, for all of you bodyslam.net subscribers, that episode will not be featured on the channel because I know, unfortunately, you guys are so upset. There is not a video version of the Starcade rant. I know you
We need a
wish there
video
was.
version.
We can just recreate it then.
We will.
There's not a video version, so it will be released audio only. So make sure that you find us on any one of your podcast platforms. Make sure you check out that episode. That's the only way you're going to be able to hear it. So we're not wrapping up here. I just want to give you guys a heads up. We're going to hand out some best ofs. We're going to really look back and think what we thought was really good, and obviously as we do on here, we look at the highs and lows. So we'll balance it out. But Andy, if you're looking at best ofs all the way around, let's talk about the best show first. Best overall show. I don't want to necessarily say that the card hit top to bottom and was perfect or whatever. But if you have to look back at AEW in 2021 and you had to pick out a show, one show that you can point to and say, I will have no problem going back and watching that show at any point in time, what would it be?
Are we talking about like not pay-per-views, but like the weekly?
It can be anything. It can be anything. It can be a pay-per-view. That's fine.
Okay.
A pay-per-view, weekly show, doesn't matter.
So I kind of give both, because for the pay-per-view, I think it absolutely has to be when CM Punk's very first match, Bryan Danielson, Adam Cole debuts. That card was amazing from top to bottom. All Out was absolutely fantastic. That's one that when I'm bored, I actually go back and watch some of those moments because they're just so much fun to watch, and I still get goosebumps from watching them. So like that was probably the best pay-per-view for AEW for me this year. And the best show was probably I forget the name of the stadium, but they did it in the first ever
the Grand Slam show.
Yeah, Grand Slam, AEW Grand Slam. I really enjoyed that. I know that was the Kenny Omega Bryan Danielson match that you're not too fond of, but I love that entire card from top to bottom. And I think that's the one show that I can look back and say that was probably the best show of the year for me.
As far as a show goes, if I'm going to pick one of the weekly shows, I'm actually going to pick AEW's first night of Return to Touring. I don't remember the exact tagline that they used for the Dynamite episode, but it was the night Malachi Black debuted. I think it was the first time we saw America's Top Team or whatever they're called with Dan Lambert and those guys. Just the atmosphere of that night for me, like, that's a show that I'm like, oh my gosh. Like the Grand Slam show, okay, that was really, really cool. But that first Return to Touring, that was money for me. And then, of course, I'm going to go with All Out as well for pay-per-view purposes, because that show, top to bottom, they hit a Grand Slam with that show and capped it off with the debuts of Adam Cole and Bryan Danielson and that sort of thing. So I'm going to go with that.
I think sentimental wise though as well, the first Rampage in Chicago, CM Punk's debut, all of that moment was just absolutely amazing. The card was not needed, but that moment made the entire show. So that was definitely up there.
What about in WWE? If you had to go back and pick a best show, and I know Raws and SmackDowns, there's a lot of those, so it's kind of hard to pick those out. So I'm not going to ask you to really go there. But if you have to pick a best show from WWE in 2021, what would it be?
Man, a majority of SmackDowns were really good this year. A majority of SmackDowns were really good. I think looking back at it, those runs when Cena was back and then him and Roman were cutting promos, I think those are some of the best shows.
So good.
The stuff we have now with Brock and Roman, I really, really enjoy as well. I think those are some good things. And then kind of on the Raw side, the not necessarily the episode, but the night Big E cashed in was just an awesome night, amazing night. So I think those are the ones that really stuck out.
What about pay-per-view wise?
Pay-per-view wise, man, I really enjoyed SummerSlam this year. SummerSlam was really good from top to bottom. I'm trying to remember what else kind of happened throughout the year. WrestleMania was good. I think the thing that made it sour for me was Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton. That definitely was not what I was looking for at all. I'm trying to think what else kind of happened.
Money in the Bank was
Money in
really
the Bank
good.
was really good. Yeah, because of Cena's return at the end, that was a big shocker. Big E winning. That was really, really cool as well.
Roman and Edge.
With that's when Seth interfered.
Yes.
And then we got the Seth Rollins Edge match and at SummerSlam. Seth Rollins Edge match at Crown Jewel was amazing. Their match
And
on
the one on
SmackDown was
SmackDown, yeah.
even better. So like, I'm not saying even better, but it was really good as well. But honestly, I think the show that sticks out the most to me this year is probably SummerSlam because you got the return of Becky, you got the return of Brock. You've got the great match between Roman and Cena that started off really slow and built up. You had Seth and Edge. There wasn't really, obviously, the Becky Lynch and Bianca Belair thing was the biggest controversy of the show. But everything else, really, I really enjoyed it.
I'm obviously going to go with SummerSlam as well. I'm wearing the shirt. I'm biased. I was there.
That makes sense.
Yeah, gonna go with SummerSlam on that one. But I truly, honestly, like if I even think that if I wasn't there, I can look at that show and be like, that was 100% the best show WWE did in 2021. And I think Money in the Bank is a second. I think WrestleMania is probably third. Money in the Bank, I think, is second. That atmosphere, that was the first weekend of live touring for WWE. So that atmosphere was a hot huge crowd. Yep. As far as TVs goes, I echo everything you just said. Obviously I loved the build up to SummerSlam with Edge and Rollins as well. All the stuff that they did. I actually enjoyed a lot of stuff after that when Rollins went into his house and they did all those kind of crazy stuff. I enjoyed that. That was some really good stuff.
Yeah.
But now that we've kind of picked out the shows of the year, and the matches don't necessarily have to come from that, but what would be your WWE match of the year? Obviously, I'm not going to make you narrow it down to just one. If you have to pick 2 or 3, that's fine. But if you had to pick WWE's match of the year, what would that be?
Shocker, it kind of comes from NXT. That Dragunov Walter match was so good. I mean, it was so good, and you had the shock of Walter tapping out, his first loss in years, literally years, coming into that crowd. The crowd was hot. The match was absolutely amazing. The stiff shots that both those guys were taking were ridiculous. I mean, absolutely ridiculous. The triple threat at WrestleMania with Roman, Edge, and Bryan was really good as well. Roman versus Cena was really good as well. But the best match probably for me was and it's so weird that it came on this show, was probably the Hell in a Cell match at Crown Jewel between Seth and Edge. Wow. That match was so good. It was so innovative. The way that, like, I think one time Edge threw Seth off the top of the cage through a table was amazing. Like everything about it was so great. And it was on the weirdest card, the card that we were like, yeah, this match is probably going to be pretty good, but I don't know what they're going to do. It's in Crown Jewel. It's in Saudi Arabia, blah, blah, blah. And it was amazing. So I think that was probably, from the WWE aspect, main roster, that was my favorite match of the year, best match of the year. And then from NXT, it has to be Dragunov and Walter.
I'm going to go as far as NXT, Walter and Ciampa. That to me, that was
and you're not even a big Walter guy.
I'm not a Walter guy at all, but that match, for some reason, it got me. I'm like, okay, yep. That was my favorite match of WrestleMania weekend, honestly. But going through a couple, I mean, my goodness, the Daniel Bryan and Roman Reigns, Bryan's last match on SmackDown, on TV, that match was incredible. If I have to pick one match, though, man, that Roman Edge match at Money in the Bank was really, really good too. Holy cow. I'm going to stick with Edge and Rollins as well, but I'm going to say the SummerSlam match is my favorite match of the year. It just, obviously for biased reasons, because it's 2 of my all-time favorites, and I'm in the building to watch them clash for the first time ever. But even in going back, we did an episode after the Madison Square Garden SmackDown match. I told you, I said, I'm going to go back and watch them both back to back, and we'll see. And I still got the feels of that SummerSlam match. So that's going to be my match of the year. What about AEW? I'll give you just a second to narrow yours down.
So many, man.
I know you've got so many. I'm going to go off the rails, and I'm going to pick one. It might surprise you, and it might not. I'm going to say Sammy Guevara versus Jay Lethal.
Wow. That match was really good.
That match literally blew my socks off.
Yep.
I don't know why, but it just did.
Yeah.
That's what I'm picking from AEW this year. Of all the great stuff I know that we've seen,
Yeah.
I would say a close second. I can't believe I'm about to say this.
Do
Close
it.
second would be
I need to hear it.
the Lucha Brothers and Young Bucks
Absolutely.
from All Out.
Absolutely.
That's a close second for me.
Yeah, I think that's definitely up there. I think that might be my favorite match of the year from AEW, and the best match of the year is that. I go back to Kenny Omega and Bryan Danielson. I go back to even Hangman Page and Bryan Danielson. I know the finishes were wonky, but the matches themselves were so good. I think also Bryan Danielson versus Minoru Suzuki was really good on TV. I look back and I look at I've got a list here. I actually kind of wrote a list down. Bryan Danielson versus Eddie Kingston, I really enjoyed. Pac versus Andrade from Rampage, right after All Out.
First one?
No, that was the first one was Britt Baker and
no, the first Andrade Pac match.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, from Rampage. That one was really, really good. I'm trying to think what else was here. Oh, the 6-man tag match from was it Dynamite? With Adam Cole and the Young Bucks versus Jurassic Express and Christian Cage. Was that Dynamite?
I want to say that was Rampage.
Rampage? Or was that...
Wasn't a pay-per-view.
It wasn't a pay-per-view. Anyways, that match was really good.
Yeah.
That match was a lot of fun. And then, to throw the women some love, the Britt Baker versus Thunder Rosa Lights Out match was brutal and so much fun to watch. I think all of those, man, it's too hard to pick. If I had to pick one, though, I think it would be the Young Bucks versus the Lucha Brothers at All Out, because that match was just so good. It was so good. Plus, they're my boys.
Of course.
Little biased. That's okay.
You are the Young Buck. All right. I am going to make you narrow this one down to one, though.
That's fine.
And you got to pick.
That's
fine. Pick one. AEW Superstar of the Year.
Oh, my.
Look back from the beginning of 2021 to the end. Number one, and it could be for a variety of reasons, obviously.
Right.
Who is your AEW Superstar of 2021?
So, I'm going to list some names, but I'll narrow it down to one, just so I can, because I'm trying to think things through as I'm talking as well. I think Kenny Omega has to be up there for sure. I think Hangman Page has to be up there for sure. I think MJF has to be up there for sure. Chris Jericho. I'm kind of excluding Punk and Cole and Danielson because they weren't there for the full year.
Agreed.
And we haven't had like a full time with them. Honestly, though, if I had to pick just one, I think it has to be Kenny Omega. I really do. I think he carried the company on his back through the first part of the year, and then kind of going through the rest of the year. I think it has to be Kenny Omega. I'm going to go ahead and say it right now. The best AEW champion so far, I think, is Kenny Omega by far. Just match quality wise, opponent wise, accolade wise, like in ring wise, I think he is definitely the best. And he just everything that he did was just absolutely perfect. He made, no offense to Christian, I love Christian, but Christian's not one of the best wrestlers out there right now. His match with Christian at All Out was fantastic, absolutely amazing. And so
it gets overlooked because of everything that was around it, and because Christian beat him like 3 weeks before that.
And that match was really good too on Rampage. Like both of their matches were so good. And everything that he does is really, really good. So I think this year the AEW Superstar of the Year has to be, or Wrestler of the Year has to be, Kenny Omega by far.
I think it's a lot for you to say that he's the best world champion ever, especially because of how high everyone was on Moxley for his run last year.
Yeah.
It just because he carried the company basically through the whole pandemic, and everybody's like, oh, that's greatest, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And for you to say, no, Kenny surpassed that. I can see it both ways, honestly.
Yeah.
If I'm going to stick on this train. The AEW Superstar of the Year is Sammy Guevara.
Yeah.
To me, like, this guy came into his own.
Yeah.
He didn't have a bad match all year long. the kind of stock that AEW has in the guy when he's one of two guys that enter the stadium at the end of Stadium Stampede and he gets the win. Like, you know where he sits in the pecking order when stuff like that happens. And you mentioned earlier his TNT title reign, and he is really coming to his own. He's consistently, no offense to Kenny Omega, Sammy Guevara is consistently having the best matches on the card, in my opinion, each and every night. So that guy is my AEW wrestler, superstar, whatever you want to call him, entertainer, because he is of the year. Like, it's, to me, it's Sammy Guevara.
I think he would be my breakout star of the year.
There you go. Okay.
I think he would really be my breakout star of the year, because to me, Kenny was more established, and that was kind of what makes him the best superstar of the year, best wrestler of the year, whatever. But Sammy Guevara was the best breakout. And to me, it's between him and MJF. Like, both of those guys are right up there. But from in-ring wise, I think it has to be Sammy. Because Sammy had, we talk about the year Kenny Omega had, we talk about the year that Roman Reigns has had. Sammy Guevara's had just about as good of a year as anybody this year. And I think that definitely plays into him being my breakout star of the year for sure.
Wouldn't shock me if he's PWI 500 number 1 in 2022, but
I think he's top 5. I think he's top 5.
Has to be.
As of right now, I think he definitely has to be top 5. Now, if he gets injured and misses like half the year, that's one thing. But I think right now, if he continues on the track that he's on, I would not be shocked. I would be disappointed if he's not top 5.
Well, that also goes to the comment that I made offline the other night too. But anyway, that's beside the point. Speaking of that, we move to the WWE Superstar of the Year, and obviously, to me, it's Roman Reigns. Like, there's not anybody even in the freaking stratosphere that Roman Reigns is in 2021. Like, obviously, if I'm going to pick somebody else, Seth Rollins has had an incredible year. Bobby Lashley's had an incredible year. Edge has had an incredible year, even though he's not been wrestling like consistently for 12 months. Those guys have had fantastic years. Drew McIntyre, Big E, I mean, the list goes on. But Roman Reigns, it's just not even close.
No, it's not. And Roman's my pick as well. The only guy I could see close would probably be between, there's 3, but probably between Edge, Seth, and Bobby. I think those are the only 3 that are close. And when I said close, I mean like 3 miles away close. So like, it's not even close. But yeah, Roman is the breakout star of the year, best star of the year. He has had a year like nobody else really. And it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop. And I don't think it's going to stop I don't think it's going to stop in 2022 either. I think he's going to be at the top of everybody's food chain for the next year to 2 years for sure.
If we're looking on the other side of that, this is not in my notes, so I'm just, flying by the seat of my pants here. If we're looking on the other side of that, name me a wrestler or 2 in each company that you didn't see enough of in 2021 that you needed to see more of, that you expected more out of. And I'll start in WWE, man. It's AJ Styles for me. Like AJ, like, it was great for him to be Grand Slam champion. I was all in on this podcast saying that, Grand Slam champion, that's fantastic. But like, it really, in a time where we needed big time single stars and big time feuds, that's a guy that you can easily slide in there. And I know we had a match at, I think it was TLC at the end of 2020 with Drew for the title. But as far as that goes, like, man, AJ just wasn't anywhere to be found as far as a big time spot or making a big time impact.
Yeah, I think for the male side, it definitely is AJ Styles. But I think from the female side, Rhea Ripley for me. Rhea Ripley should have been top of the list for the women's side of things. Like, whether she was on Raw or SmackDown, she should have been in the main event scene all year long. And I think that is, to me, that's the biggest disappointment this year has been the booking of Rhea Ripley throughout most of the year. And I mean, I think because we talked about Roman being like the best superstar of the year, I think for me, for the women's side of things, Bianca Belair has had,
of course,
such a great year. And I think she deserves to be at the top of that. And I think Rhea Ripley should have been right up there with her, but she was not this year. So I think that's my biggest disappointment for that this year was Rhea.
In thinking about AEW, I'm going to say one more superstar that I didn't mention that is a really close second, maybe even top of Sammy Guevara, and that's Britt Baker.
Yep.
Like she is next to Sammy Guevara, she is head and shoulders above the rest
She
of the
is.
crew. I mean, she
Yep.
really is. But as far as a disappointing AEW star, can you think of anybody while I'm sitting here thinking? Is anybody that jumps out to you? Man,
Not off the top of my head. I'm trying to think.
I'm gonna say Christian. And the
Okay.
reason I'm gonna say Christian is because I feel like that obviously I'm comparing him to Edge because that's who you
They're
compare him
brothers.
to.
They're brothers. Yeah.
Exactly, the brothers. But like I feel like when he came into AEW at Revolution,
Yep.
and it took him until September to get a world title shot, and since then he's kind of been in the shadows of Jurassic Express kind of thing. I
Yep.
just don't. I don't know, man. I feel like that the hype of him coming in could have been capitalized on better. And I don't know that that's necessarily his fault, but I just expected more from
Yep.
him, especially with how giddy he was to get in there and how excited he was. and it just, I don't know, man, it hasn't happened. So I think he's going to be disappointing for me.
Yeah. I think if I had to pick somebody, I think I'm gonna actually pick a tag team. And I think it's Santana and Ortiz.
Oh, that's a good one. That's
I
really
think
good.
they get lost sometimes in the inner circle. And then like I think they need to be AEW tag team champions at some point, and I think
I
they
agree.
could be the ones that take the belts off of the Lucha Brothers. I think that would be a great match. Um, Even with like a crazy stipulation, because all four of those guys don't mind bleeding and like doing
Right.
crazy things, and so I think that would be a great way to get the belts off the Lucha Brothers. And Santana and Ortiz really deserve it. I mean, they are so good. They are so charismatic as well. They're funny. You can get behind them. You can hate them at the same time. So I think they're probably my most disappointing thing this year is Santana and Ortiz.
I know we have gone kind of long on this, but this is the year in
We're
review of
covering a year.
2021. We're covering a year of stuff, and there are so many things, man,
There is.
that we did not hit throughout this whole thing. I mean, just some incredible matches that both companies put on. We didn't even talk about the Miz cashing in a Money in the Bank. Edge entered the Royal Rumble at number 1, and he won the whole thing.
Yeah.
We didn't talk in depth about AEW Grand Slam. I mean, we mentioned it, but Jungle Boy got a shot at the AEW title this year.
Yeah.
According to Trent, I think this is right, the only 5-star match of Kenny Omega's PWI run was him and Ray Phoenix
Yeah.
from the New Year's
Triple
Smash
H.
or whatever.
Oh yeah.
From that match, then you got Shaq finally getting in the ring, just all kinds of stuff, man, throughout this year that we didn't talk about.
I forgot that even happened. I forgot
Yeah.
Shaq even wrestled this year.
Shaq wrestled for sure.
My goodness.
But when you look back, 2 more questions, and then we'll call it quits here. When you look back at 2021, what do you think? And I'm going to ask you this is not necessarily your favorite thing, so we're getting there. When you look back at 2021, what do you think AEW is going to be remembered for? I know we talked earlier about what sticks out to you, but as far as when you look back at 2021 as a whole, what's AEW going to be remembered for?
I think they're going to be remembered for picking up the right talent at the right time. Because they have done that, because that's been one of our biggest concerns with AEW and with all of these WWE releases, is, are they going to have too many guys that are going to get lost in the shuffle? And honestly, we have not seen that happen yet. I think obviously when guys like Bryan Danielson and Adam Cole are leaving or thinking about leaving, you're an idiot if you don't go try to talk to them and try to get them to come to your company.
Sure.
And the fact that you got them is massive. But also some of these release guys that you have coming in that are making a massive impact as well. So I think they're going to be remembered for picking up the right talent at the right time and using them and utilizing them right away.
I think they're going to be remembered specifically for All Out 2021. I think that goes down as the greatest AEW pay-per-view of all time for numerous reasons.
Yep.
CM Punk's first match in 7 years, the debut of Ruby Soho, Bryan Danielson, and Adam Cole.
And Minoru Suzuki just kind of got pushed in
Minoru
there.
Suzuki. Forgot about that.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to be remembered for that. Like, I think you can encompass AEW 2021 in that night right there. If somebody were to ask me, hey, what's AEW all about? I would point them to that show right there. It's like, if you don't know what they're about, by the end of that show, then something's wrong.
Yeah.
If you can't figure it out. So I think that event defined AEW right there. It still boggles my mind that all of that happened in one night. It's crazy to me.
And it didn't feel out of place or like too much at once. Like they handled it so well.
Yep, they did. What about WWE? What do you think when you look back at 2021, good or bad, what's WWE going to be remembered for?
Unfortunately, I think it's the year of the releases. I mean, that's what it is at this point, because it's not just like a handful at the beginning of the year or like kind of what they did with 2020, but it was consistently throughout the year.
Yep.
All of these releases. And while also reporting their biggest like profit for a long time. If not, I don't remember exactly, but it's record numbers of profit this year for them as well. And so I think all of that, unfortunately, is what they're going to be remembered by a lot. I know a lot of fans have stopped watching WWE because of that reason. And so I think that's what 2021 is going to be remembered as, is the year of the releases for WWE.
I think it's going to be remembered for the death of your developmental system.
Yep.
NXT is done.
Yep.
As we know it.
Yep.
No more Adam Cole. No more Johnny Gargano. No more
Kyle
O'Reilly. No more Karrion Kross. No more Samoa Joe. Keith Lee.
Samoa Joe was NXT champion this year.
Right.
I forgot. Like I completely forgot about that. Like he was NXT champion this year, and it's just gone. Like it's all of that era of NXT is completely gone now.
I'm not saying that WWE cannot produce stars out of NXT 2.0, because it's obviously it's still yet to be seen. The jury is still out. What I'm saying is if WWE was ever going to capture that wrestling vibe again, or that wrestling company again, you just flushed it down the toilet.
You did,
unfortunately.
absolutely,
and you killed that. So if you were ever going to bring the best wrestlers into the company, you just squandered your chance to do that. And I hate to look back at WWE in a negative way, but it's hard not to just see the glaring releases and the death of NXT. And WWE did some great things in 2021. My favorite memory of wrestling is going to come from WWE in 2021. But if you ask me what they're known for, like that just...
And I think if we to throw a positive spin on it real quick, because both of those were negative. I think to throw a positive spin on it is the year of Roman Reigns and Bobby Lashley. I think that's also what 2021 is going to be remembered as, is the year of those two guys. Roman becoming the biggest star in WWE, maybe the greatest star of all time at the end of it all. And Bobby Lashley finally breaking through Vince McMahon's glass ceiling and saying, no, you can put the company on my back and I will carry it through everything. And I think that's a big part of it as well.
I agree. All right. As we look at the negative side, we'll get to positives in just a minute, guys. If you look back across the board, AEW, WWE, all the things, most disappointing thing in the wrestling business in 2021, if you had to put your finger on one or two things that were just hugely disappointing for you.
Yeah. I think it's... Oh man, there's two that are sticking out to me, and they're two I've already talked about kind of earlier. I think it's the WrestleMania match between Bray Wyatt and The Fiend. I think that put the biggest sour taste in my mouth for WrestleMania that night, and for just especially how the Fiend character and how Bray Wyatt kind of ended. And then two, it's just you had Keith Lee and you let him go. Like that's the second thing. You had Keith Lee and you let him go.
Mine's going to come from AEW. My most disappointing thing in wrestling in 2021 is Blood and Guts.
Yeah.
The match.
Yeah, that's up there too.
Total. I thought the whole match was brutal, and not in a good way.
Yeah.
Like, you built this thing up for a year, really? Because they were going to do it 2 weeks into the pandemic, I think, and then they postponed it. You built this thing up. It was a great way to be able to, to wait and get fans in there. Cool, whatever. But I thought the whole thing sucked.
Yeah,
I really did. From Jericho hanging out on the side, talking to the referees the whole time, and just them climbing up to the top of the cage during a commercial break. I don't care if it is picture in picture.
yeah.
Like, and the way that they didn't shoot anything in the ring after Jericho and MJF were on top of the cage. Let's not forget shooting Jericho going down to the ramp and it clearly being cardboard and no way of covering it up. And just, I thought it was awful. Is the worst thing in 2021 to me. And that is more than the exploding barbed wire death match.
Yep.
Because that was bad too. All right. Let's put some positive spins on 2021, man. You talked about Roman Reigns. You talked about Bobby Lashley. We've talked about Kenny Omega and Sammy Guevara and Britt Baker and just all the great things that 2021 has brought us. I know what your answer is going to be, but I'm going to have to ask anyway. I'm not gonna tell you can't use it because I know what the answer is gonna be.
Thank you.
What's your favorite moment of 2021 in wrestling?
We freaking got CM Punk back, man. That is the biggest thing to me. That is, no matter what would have happened for the rest of the year, I don't care if he had one match. That one match was CM Punk, and that's just, it was such a cool moment for me personally because CM Punk is what got me into pro wrestling. I've said this 1,000 times on the podcast, and I'll probably say it 1,000 more times. But he got me he got me into pro wrestling, and his just abrupt end to pro wrestling was very sad and heartbreaking. And just seeing him come back and seeing all of it come back was just absolutely amazing. So the best moment of the year by far for me is CM Punk's return in pro wrestling.
I am going to say I'm going to take Vegas out of the situation because obviously that would be my pick. Hey, I was in Las Vegas for the best pay-per-view of the year. I got to see Edge and Rollins. I got to see Roman and Cena and Brock, and I got to see Becky and blah, blah, blah. Clearly, that right there was great. But if I'm taking that out of the equation, because, that's a cop-out. Honestly, man, the best thing about wrestling in 2021 was Edge going the distance and winning the Royal Rumble. Like, the feeling of him winning that match.
Yeah.
Because you think in your head, Edge is the grizzled veteran. They're not going to let him do it. They're not going to let him do it.
He can't do it.
He can't do it. He can't. And then Christian comes out and is in the Rumble too. So even though it was in the ThunderDome, there were no fans. Like that Rumble match and then Edge winning it. I loved it so much. And that just springboarded to Edge wrestling all year and then me getting to see him in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
All right, man. Anything else you want to add about 2021 before we sign off? I mean, like I said earlier, we didn't even talk about the rain delay for WrestleMania. We didn't even
I forgot about that.
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
WrestleMania was rain delayed for 45 minutes.
And they had some of the best segments of promos in that 30 minutes because they just let them go out and talk. That's just that's the best thing. I think one other thing, obviously the Punk thing is my favorite moment, but my second favorite moment would have to be the debuts later that night, or debuts of Adam Cole and Bryan Danielson, because that moment has never happened in history in pro wrestling that I can remember. I don't know if it ever happened again, and it was absolutely perfect. So that's a second best thing for me. Sure. And it was just, this year was so much fun. Obviously, there's always going to be positives and negatives every year for pro wrestling and just in life in general. But to me, this year, the positives outweigh the negatives tenfold. And I think that's so great. And it shows how pro wrestling is advancing and moving forward and is in the best spot it's been in years and possibly the best spot it's ever been in. And I think that's so cool that we're seeing that unfold before us right now.
2022 is going to be a big
it's going to be fun
year. It's going to be so big. Can't wait, man. We didn't even talk about us going to Monday Night Raw and being for the draft and just all kinds of, man, just wow.
Vince McMahon is back on TV.
Vince McMahon's back on TV consistently.
With needed subtitles, but that's fine.
Well, that's Anyway, all right, man. That really wraps up 2021 in a nutshell. If there's something that you want to hear about that we didn't specifically address, please tweet us. We're at PBW Podcast. PBW Podcast. Why do I get tongue-tied saying that? at PBW Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Andy is at Andy_PBWP. I am at Chris Belcher 24. Make sure you hit us up on social media. We'll be glad to talk about it the next time that we roll around to you. Hope you all have a safe and happy holidays. Make sure you subscribe to our show. Make sure you tune in every Monday and Wednesday. Don't forget this Monday, available audio only for Andy's birthday. It is the Star K97 rant. It'll be a flashback episode featuring myself and Jared Justice. It's one you don't want to miss. I promise. For Mr. Andy York, my name is Chris Belcher. Thank you so much for checking out the PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast. Merry Christmas, everybody. We will catch you down the road. All right.
Sweet, man.